Welcome back to another episode of Whispers of Literature. Let's move on to another important part of the speech. Up to this point, Dr. Ambedkar has thanked the people who helped prepare the Constitution. Now, before discussing the Constitution itself, he pauses to express his gratitude to someone who played a very important role in guiding the Constituent Assembly. Let's understand who that person was and why Ambedkar appreciated him so much. Here, Dr. Ambedkar thanks Dr. Rajendra Prasad, who was the president of the Constituent Assembly. According to Ambedkar, Dr. Rajendra Prasad conducted proceedings of the Assembly with great patience, fairness, and dignity. Ambedkar also mentions that there were moments when the work of drafting the Constitution could have been delayed because of technical, legal objections. These were very stressful moments for him. However, Dr. Rajendra Prasad did not allow unnecessary technical issues to interfere with the larger task of framing the Constitution. Because of his wise leadership, the Assembly continued its work smoothly. This shows us that a good leader is someone who remains calm during difficult situations and always keeps the larger goal in mind. Before we continue, let's quickly understand a few important words. Pause the video and go through. Let's quickly summarize this paragraph. Ambedkar thanks Dr. Rajendra Prasad for 4 important reasons. First, he conducted the meetings fairly. Second, he treated every member of the assembly with respect. Third, he prevented unnecessary legal objections from delaying the constitution. And finally, his leadership helped the assembly complete this historic task successfully. So Ambedkar reminds us that good leadership is just as important as good ideas. The most important lesson here is very simple. Leadership is not about authority alone. A true leader listens patiently, treats everyone fairly, and keeps everyone focused on the common goal. That is exactly the quality Ambedkar admired in Dr. Rajendra Prasad. Now the speech takes an even more interesting turn. Ambedkar now asks an important question. Can a constitution by itself guarantee good governance? This paragraph contains one of the most famous statements in the entire speech. Instead of reading it, let's understand the powerful message that Ambedkar is trying to convey. The next paragraph continues the same idea. Together, these 2 paragraphs explain why the success of a constitution depends more on people than on the document itself. Pause the video and go through the word meanings. This is probably one of the most quoted ideas from Ambedkar's speech. He says that even the best constitution can fail if it is implemented by dishonest or irresponsible people. On the other hand, even a constitution with some weaknesses can work successfully if the people who run it are honest, capable, and committed to nation's welfare. In other words, the Constitution provides the framework, but it is the people who bring that framework to life. Ambedkar also explains that the Constitution creates institutions such as legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. However, how these institutions function depends entirely on the people who work within them and the political parties they form. If political parties respect democratic values, the constitution will function well. But if they choose violence or unconstitutional methods to achieve their goals, even the best constitution cannot protect the country. So before judging any constitution, Ambedkar says we must first look at the people who are responsible for implementing it. Imagine buying the most advanced laptop in the world. If the person using it doesn't know how to operate it properly or intentionally misuses it, the laptop won't work or it won't perform well. The problem is not with the laptop. The problem is the user. Ambedkar says the same thing about the Constitution. A constitution is only as effective as the people who use it. Let's quickly revise the important point from this section. A constitution alone cannot guarantee success. Its success depends on honest leaders, responsible citizens, and political parties that respect democratic values. This is one of the central messages of Ambedkar's entire speech, and it remains relevant even today. Up to this point, Ambedkar has explained that the constitution should not be blamed for every problem. Much depends on the people who implement it. In the next section, he addresses another important question. Why did some political parties criticize the constitution? We'll see what those criticisms were and how Ambedkar responds to them. Now the speech enters a very interesting stage. Up to this point, Dr. Ambedkar has explained that a constitution cannot succeed unless the people who implement it are responsible. But naturally, not everyone agreed with the constitution. Some political parties criticized it for different reasons. In this section, Ambedkar explains what those criticisms were and then responds to them one by one. So now let's look at a few word meanings. Pause the video and go through. Ambedkar says that the constitution was mainly criticized by two groups, the Communist Party and the Socialist Party. The Communist Party did not support parliamentary democracy. Instead, it wanted a system called the dictatorship of the proletariat, where political power would remain with the working class. The Socialist Party had a different concern. It wanted the government to be able to take over private property without paying compensation. It also wanted fundamental rights without restrictions so that it could freely oppose the government if necessary. Ambedkar explains these criticisms fairly. He doesn't mock these parties or dismiss their opinions. Instead, he prevents their views before giving his own response. After explaining the criticisms, Ambedkar gives an important clarification. He says that he is not claiming that parliamentary democracy is the only perfect system in the world. He is also not saying that private property must always be protected in the same way or that fundamental rights can never be changed. His point is much simpler. The Constitution reflects the decisions made by the Constituent Assembly at that point in history. These decisions represented the views of the people who drafted the Constitution. Therefore, it is unfair to blame the drafting committee simply because some political parties disagree with those decisions. To strengthen his argument, Ambedkar now quotes Thomas Jefferson, one of the most important leaders in American history. Don't worry if the quotation sounds difficult. It was written more than 200 years ago, so the language is naturally old-fashioned. Let's understand the idea behind it instead. Jefferson says that every generation should be considered a separate nation. What does that mean? It simply means that every generation has different needs, different challenges, and different priorities. Therefore, one generation should not make permanent laws that future generation can never change. Ambedkar completely agrees with this idea. He believes that while the Constitution should provide stability, it should also allow future citizens to improve it whenever necessary through democratic methods. Think about technology. Imagine if India had laws written before the internet existed and refused to change them. Would those laws be enough to deal with cybercrime or online privacy? Of course not. Society changes and laws must be able to adapt to new realities. Ambedkar doesn't stop with one quotation. He gives another famous statement by Jefferson, which is even more powerful. Again, instead of focusing on the difficult language, let's understand the central idea. Jefferson says that institutions should not become so rigid that people cannot improve them. He criticizes the idea that earlier generations have the right to make laws that future generations can never change. Then comes his famous statement, "The earth belongs to the living, not the dead." This does not mean we should ignore history or disrespect our ancestors. Instead, Jefferson means that people who are alive today should have the freedom to improve their country's laws whenever circumstances change. Ambedkar quotes this idea because he believes that a constitution should be respected, but it should never become so rigid that it cannot adapt to changing times. Pause the video and go through the word meanings. Let's summarize what we have learned. First, Ambedkar explains that different political parties criticized the constitution because they wanted different political systems. Second, he reminds us that the constitution reflects the decisions of the Constituent Assembly, not just the drafting committee. Finally, by quoting Thomas Jefferson, he teaches us that every generation should have the democratic right to improve and amend the constitution whenever necessary. Remember, a constitution is a living document. It should grow with the nation. It should never be restricted by anyone. You can also go through the question answer. So, what is the main message of this section? Ambedkar believes that no constitution should remain frozen forever. That's all for part 2 of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's speech. In the next video, we'll continue with the remaining part of the speech. If you found this explanation helpful, please like, share and subscribe to Whispers of Literature. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.